Record. Oh gosh. Okay. I think we're set. Yes. It said give you the recording pop up. Okay.
Yep,
Perfect.
for me.
Hi, everybody. My name is Justine. My pronouns are she, her, and I am your host today for Asian Wander Women. And I am sitting out of a cafe today. Just some background information in case you see anybody or hear anything. And I am located in Vancouver usually. I'm in Squamish for the weekend. I'm camping, so I feel like I am fully embodying Asian Wonder Women this weekend with this. I have never felt so location independent while still doing the cool things and running the meetings. But I just want to tell you a little bit about the community before we get started, and then we'll jump right into the chat. But Asian Wonder Women is an online Facebook community group founded by Emily Fang and Ivy Xu. It was created in 2020 during the pandemic, and it provided resources to inspire female Asians who are nomadic. And whether you're working a remote job or a location independent digital entrepreneur, an expat teaching English in a foreign country, or a frequent traveler with a home base, or just someone who desires the nomadic life, Asian Wonder Women is for you. And I'm sure a lot of you have found your way here because you identify in those ways as well. And we are now a 2,000 plus organically grown community in various cities like Taipei, New York, San Francisco, Toronto, Singapore, and more. And just as many of you have fired off in the chat, also like in the US here in Sacramento, San Jose. Thank you everyone for joining us. And today we have Mars with us to have our conversation about having and taking an adult gap year, which is really exciting. I'm personally really excited for this conversation because I feel like it's very relatable for me as well. We were just saying before everyone joined us in the chat that I inadvertently also took an adult gap year. So very relatable for sure. But Mars, can you start with a little bit of an introduction on who you are? Just let us know who you are first.
Right. So I'm Mars. I have been working remotely since I think around since the pandemic too. I'm a product manager based in the Philippines. And yeah, basically this January, I decided I was gonna quit my job and take what I call an adult gap year. For some people, they call it sabbatical. And I have since connected with a lot of other women in the community as I was traveling from cities to cities. Part of my kind of like my plan this sabbatical was to travel. And so, yeah, happy to be sitting here with Justine for Asian Wonder Women.
Thank you. So yeah, let's just ask the big question of why take the adult gap year? Like what led you to this decision?
I'm sure a lot of, a lot of other women can relate to the feeling of burnout. I think that's really like the catalyst for a lot of people who quit their jobs. For me, it started like I had that feeling around maybe 2019. And I decided I wanted to pivot my career to something that was less taxing. And then I said, like, okay, like I wanted to give myself the best chance possible to do that career pivoting. And then eventually it became like a desire to like take a year off and just give myself the permission to fail in life, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever society expects of me. So that's how it started. A little background, a little background. Before I was working in product, I was working in operations. And I would say like it's really taxing because you have to always be available. You have to be almost on call when something breaks. It's very reactive, and I didn't have a headspace for other things, for other projects. And I realized if I keep on, chasing that career path, I was going to be exhausted for the rest of my life. And don't get me wrong, it's a good career path, right? But it's just I don't see myself doing it like, for a few more decades. Like, and
Yeah.
I said to myself, if I'm going to like drive myself to the ground this much, might as well do something that I would actually enjoy, right? And that I can like I wouldn't mind doing like day in, day out. So that's really how it started, I would say.
Yeah. I think I took away a couple of things from what you said. I think failure is so important, like giving yourself the space to fail because some of our biggest learnings in life often are when we fail, right? And although failure can feel scary, it's also just such a great like growth and learning opportunity. And
Right.
then what you said at the end there about, oh my gosh, what was the last thing you said? It made me think of something.
Like if you're going to drive yourself to the ground.
Oh yes, burnout. Yeah.
Yeah.
So many of us, like, you start to notice the signs and
Mhm.
signals of you
Mhm.
like reaching burnout, but even when you notice that, it's hard to step away, right?
Mhm.
Because the reason you have burnout can be because you have this really stable, well-paying job. And so
Mhm.
stepping away from that means stepping away from this like life you've created for yourself. So
Mhm.
even though you're unhappy or you're like feeling burnout, it feels almost even scarier to not be in that place that you're already in.
Mhm.
It feels
Mhm.
like the alternative is going to be worse than the burnout,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So it can be really difficult to step away from that. So
Mhm.
when you decided to take the gap year, like mentally, how were you preparing yourself? Like, how did you psych yourself up to be like, okay, you know what? It's time. I need to do this.
It wasn't easy. It was like almost, so I had this thought 2019, right? Tail end 2019. I didn't do the gap year until 2023 because there was like a lot of,
Wow.
yeah, it was a lot of, and you're right, right? Like once you've like built a certain lifestyle, like it becomes like too much to lose at one point and it becomes scary. So in my case, I just wanted to manifest that resignation letter, like going out. So I wrote a resignation letter. So it was 2019. I wrote a resignation letter that was dated for December 2020. So I was like,
Oh, I love that. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. Like it was like addressed to the HR. Like it was already mentioning people who I loved working with. And like for me, I did that because I really had to convince myself that I have to do it.
Mm,
So I gave myself like a year to be able to submit that. And so the next year, in the upcoming year, my goal was just to save as much money as I can so that I can afford like a 6 month to 12-month runway. Where initially the plan was I wanted to like do like pivot to a more technical role where I can actually like have more time to think. And I was really enjoying like data work at the time because I was already crunching numbers at my job and I wanted to get into either business intelligence or data science. And I've done a code like a boot camp before, like a coding boot camp, trying to become like a software developer. But I feel like I did it incorrectly because I did it on top of my full-time job in the past.
mm.
Ended up not like exactly finishing the boot camp. I did like 5 months out of 6, and I ended up becoming like a vegetable in the process.
I just dropped.
And it wasn't
It
wasn't
does?
really like I told myself if I'm gonna do this again, I'm gonna give myself the best possible chance that I can. So I knew I wanted if I'm gonna do like a career pivot, like I want to just be able to focus on that. So that was the original plan. But coming back to like the plan of like how do I even do that, right? Because I didn't have the financial confidence to take care of you know
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, so I put up my spreadsheets and then I just like started computing my expenses and like what's the most realistic amount of money that I can live off of, like if I was actually being frugal with my lifestyle. And then I multiplied that by 12 and I told myself along with the resignation letter that I just drafted by December 2020, as I send this to like send the send button to the on my email to the HR, I should have this much amount of money already.
Mm.
Yeah, that's kind of like how it started.
I kind of want to get even more detailed with your budgeting because obviously your budget will vary from country to country,
Exactly.
right? So did you base it off of like if I went to the most expensive country, like if I lived in Switzerland for the year, this is how much money I would need. Like how did you decide what was that monthly amount?
Absolutely not. And I love that you're diving into this because this is such an important topic, especially for Asian women. So for me, I was based in the Philippines at that time. In the Asian culture, at least in the Filipino culture, there is a culture of actually like supporting like the expenses back home, like you chipping in. So like on top of like my expenses, you kind of like are expected to chip in on like the expenses at home. And if I was going to do this, like take time off, like I didn't want like anybody's life to stop, like it was kind of like the risks are higher for me.
Yeah, what
So
you do impacts other people.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to do was to create an environment where I can get away from the consequences of unemployment and nobody will be affected, you
Mm.
know. So I definitely, and at the time I was living in like, it was more of the well-off neighborhood in the Philippines. So my budget is a little higher than usual. But like I took all of that into account. And also like I kind of wanted to do some traveling along the way. And that was also put into account as I was budgeting.
Ah, okay. So part of the budgeting was recognizing that you might not spend the whole time traveling. You might actually like spend some time at home just focusing on this boot camp and then
Mhm.
also adding in some travel.
Yeah, like
Okay.
just enough wiggle room to have some fun. But also like, yeah, like the like basic expenses, if I was being frugal, possible like travel budget, like whatever, like I need to chip in the expenses at home. And then like also like the boot camp, which also costs money. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm very financially oriented. And
Mhm.
so I have like a million questions I want to ask about the budget and the finance, but I'm going to ask some other questions. And then at the end, there will be like a Q&A portion. So if anyone else is also curious about the finance, pop it into the chat. We'll definitely get to it after, but I just don't want to occupy the whole time talking about finances because I definitely could.
Mhm.
But I'm curious, how did your family and friends react when you delivered the news to them?
I didn't tell any of my friends. Like all of this was just like in my mind, and I didn't feel the need to tell my family because um it's just not something like that. Like I guess like when I was about to do it, like I gave them a heads up, but when I was planning it was just like all in my head. And yeah, they weren't like, there weren't any like violent reactions, or they were just more of like, okay, like it's your time. They all know that I've never had like a break. Like
Mm,
I was either in school or I was working or I was doing both. And at the time, this like before I even graduated college, I was already like in a almost like in a managerial position. And so like yeah, my family just knew like I've never really had like taken a break myself, and they were just happy that I was gonna do it.
mm.
Yeah.
That's so nice to have the support.
Mhm.
That's a huge difference too, I think that's probably a big fear for a lot of people as well, like the
Mhm.
reaction of those around them. So I'm really glad you had that support. So I think I'm missing part of the timeline. So you decided in 2019 you wanted to take the gap year. You post dated your resignation letter for 2020, but you took the gap year this year in 2023,
2023, right.
right? So what
There's
happened? What's
a few
going on
missing
here?
years there. Right. Crazy times. So what happened was when I was ready, like at the end of 20, almost at the end of the 2020, I had like 92% of like what I said I needed to have.
Mm,
Um, but at the time we brought in a head of product, a new head of product in the company, and he was like really cool. Like he's been with a lot of like unicorn companies in Silicon Valley, and he offered me a spot in his team. Like he was trying to recruit me because he learned that I was gonna go. And we've worked on projects before because there were overlaps in our roles.
mm,
And he was just like recruiting me into his product team, and he basically gave me like a really meaningful compensation for me. And he told me like he was just he was going to mentor me and all that, and it was an offer that was really hard to refuse. And before that, I wanted to shift my career to data, but I told myself, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. Like, why not? Like, this is really, I think this is going to open many doors for me. So, like, I tried that out and I enjoyed it until he left, like maybe early 2022. And I was like, crap, like, I'm here because I want to learn from him. And so, like, I started like revisiting my plans for for taking a year off 2022.
okay. So then ultimately, once you revisited the plans, where did you end up traveling to? I think people will be curious to hear where you ended up.
Um, so yeah, so like right now, like the last couple of months, I've been traveling around Europe, and then I'll be heading in Asia. But a big chunk of like I'm doing a gap year. Europe is one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive, like city. but I went to Europe because I actually got recently engaged, and I had started like,
Congrats.
thank you so much. I had started like talking about the idea of revenge travel with my fiance. I did mine last year with a friend. Like we went to Bali in Southeast Asia for like 2 months. And then like he is now doing his revenge travel, and I'm just really like tagging along. I don't want like to set the expectation that I had, I'm doing a gap year and I'm like just gallivanting around Europe. Like that's totally not the case. Yeah, I don't want to give that impression. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But the European portion, you were alone?
No, I was with my fiance.
Or with
That
him?
was
Okay.
revenge travel. Yeah.
Okay.
This
Cool.
yeah, this coming like the Asia and coming back to Bali though, like yeah, I'll be traveling with some friends there. So it would be fun.
Nice. Nice. Um, so okay. So because you're tagging along, do you think I'm trying to just think like how would this have differed if you were in a different relationship situation, right? Like if you
Oh
were
yeah,
if
I
you were
was
single.
totally well, here's the thing, right? When I did my revenge travel last year, I went to Bali, and it surprised me because the prices were like Philippines, like I was based in the Philippines. The prices are already like not as expensive as it is in Europe or America, but
Mm-hmm.
the prices in Bali are subsidized by their government, like at least the gas. So
Hmm.
it really blew my mind that, like, for example, the prices of gas was a third from where my previous home base was. And just the quality of life was so much higher because you have access to nature, like easy access to nature. And the quality of food was so much better, and it wasn't breaking the bank. And I've decided that if I was going to do the gap year alone, I was going to go back to Bali for
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you end? So the year of budgeting,
Yes.
did it last you? Like, do you feel like you saved the right amount?
It was crazy. I saved the right amount, and also at the same time, I gained so much weight, and I had so many acnes because it just like it messed with me, right? Like you have a financial goal, and you were just like, I had a full-time job that was already demanding, and I had 3 to 4 side hustles. I was selling like all kinds of things, like insurance. I got into real estate. At one point, I sold 20 houses. Actually, I don't know how that happened. It's like so pandemic crept in. Most economies, like the economies, like stopped, right? But the gig economy actually like thrived so well and so much because all these companies are now figuring out a new way to do business. And they're like, for example, in the real estate gig that I had, like if it wasn't the pandemic, I would have to like, get licensed and attend trainings and all that. During that time, I was so lucky because they actually paused some policies, with of course the caveat of like, oh, you have to work super closely with your like sales manager and all that stuff. But I was able to get into industries that I would normally not get into, I would say. And then like I just studied also, like I studied like Facebook ads. I built chatbots to kind of like help me with the leads and all that. So I experimented a lot in 2020, and thus I gained like 30 pounds because I was just doing a lot at that time.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say kind of a silver lining of like having the opportunity to like get your foot in the door to a lot of different
Yes, yes,
opportunities that you wouldn't
yes.
normally, but at the same time also, yeah, the physical payoff that you had, right, from
Mhm,
overexerting yourself,
mhm.
right? Which I
Right,
guess,
right. And I
sorry, go
would
ahead.
say it's easier to see the light at the end of the tunnel because you know that you're only going to yes, you're going to exert this much amount of effort, but there's like an end to it. And the end is gonna be like worth it. Like you're going to take a mini retirement after all this, basically. And that's what's on my mind at the time. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. To your point, I think, yeah, that's the terminology we used before this call, right? I was saying, so I didn't voluntarily take this adult gap year, but I'm looking at the date now and I was laid off July 26th of 2022. So it's been
Mhm,
just over a year. And I've been working super, super, super part-time because I spent most of my gap year taking traveling. And
mhm.
so it wasn't until I got back from my travels around like February that I started working again. And even working, I was working a part time job only 3 days a month. and not 3 full days. Okay, 3 like evenings a month. So
Interesting.
really extra casual part time. And so I have barely been working. I don't really count it as I've been working, especially because the part time role that I'm working right now is something I love. I'm like hosting similar to this, but I'm emceeing for live music events.
Well,
And
nice.
so it doesn't feel like work for me. It's just really fun, really
Wait,
lighthearted.
that's the three evenings a month gig that you have?
The 3 nights a month. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Um,
so I haven't been working, and yeah, we've been calling it like a mini retirement, right? Because the reason I decided to continue on for this long for this year is because at one point I had to, so I did my initial travels using my severance from my
mhm,
layoffs. And then after the severance, I went to double check my financial situation. And I was like, hey, I think I'm actually still okay. And so
mhm.
I thought, how long can I maintain this lifestyle? Because how many times in your adult life can you really get to enjoy
Exactly.
retirement before retirement?
Exactly. And to add to that, I would have to say, because like, okay, so going back right to the timeline, it was 2022, right? My boss left and I was like, okay, well, like I was keeping this job so I can learn from you. And I, even if I already had the more of the financial confidence to resign, I couldn't quit still because I feel like um there are things that like the stable employment that I have, like it buys me like so many things. For example, it buys me the opportunity to purchase a home if I wanted to. And like banks just wouldn't like let you like take a property loan if you're unemployed, or it buys me the opportunity to travel. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
I'm holding like a Filipino passport, which means that I don't have, like before I can go to all these countries, I need to file up like 200 pages of paperwork,
Mhm.
and the most important document there is your certificate of employment. So I couldn't like I felt like I was gonna lose a lot of things if I actually resigned. So it took me a while before I was able to do that. I had to like prepare around those scenarios. I had to like consult a bank officer to kind of like really understand what would happen to my eligibility if I
Mm.
actually if I actually like, quit my job. I had to schedule visa appointments and get all the stickers that I needed to travel. And then like the insurance part also is super important. So I had to like, I actually went to like, the hospitals and like get all checkups that my insurance can afford me. And then I stocked up on insurance privately myself as well. So I had to like do a lot of preparations to do a mini retirement. But the thing that really convinced me to do it now was the fact that I'm in my late 20s. Like as you were saying, Justine, like you don't really have that much time, time or window where you can take this opportunity now. For
Mhm.
me, like I felt like this is a ripe like window for me to do some more YOLOing before failing became a little more uncomfortable for me. Like I feel like
Yes.
I don't well, like I, I just feel like if I'm doing it maybe like in my 30s, maybe mid 30s, or it's gonna be a little bit more uncomfortable for me that I'm still like I'm still failing at so many things and I'm still like experimenting with life. But I may be wrong. I feel maybe I'll be in my mid 30s or early 30s and I still feel like the world is my oyster. But at the moment, sorry, during that time, that's how I felt. I felt like there is a window where failing is still super acceptable, super encouraged. And, like you don't always get that window, if that makes sense.
Totally. And good use of the word YOLOing
Yeah.
because it's interesting. So I was talking about this today on the drive up to where I'm camping. And when you're a kid and you're learning something new and you fail at it, the adults around you, they encourage you and they cheer you on and they're
Exactly.
like, you're doing great. Just get back on the bike. Don't worry about it. Like, just try again. And there's so much encouragement and love when you fail. But as an adult, it is way scarier to fail, right?
Right.
The perception you give people, the optics of failure, the judgment, the
Yeah.
the way people are saying like, what do you mean you don't know how to ride a bike? Aren't you an adult? Like, how did you go your whole life without knowing how to do this thing? And so
Mhm.
failure is so much scarier as an adult. But I think you're right. We all have this kind of mindset where up to a certain age, it's still quote unquote acceptable.
Mhm.
That being said, I think, like you said, it's possible like we could reach X age, like in our 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, and still make new failures and still be
Mhm.
learning and it'll still be totally acceptable, but it doesn't feel that way because of societal pressure,
Mhm. Right.
right? And I think that's a huge part of it too. Like taking the adult gap year can feel so scary because there's so many pressures from every angle, right? That you just never know who's going to react a certain way or who's going to
Right.
say what or how it's going to impact other people. You think it's just going to impact yourself, but for some reason it does XYZ trickle down effect. And so
Right.
taking the adult gap year can feel really, really scary.
Right. And I would also add that there's this element, unfortunately, for women, like there's the element of your biological clock. In my case, like I just got engaged, and like I don't know what I would want to do in my like 30s. Maybe I would want to like actually settle down and build a family.
Hmm.
But but right now I don't feel the need or the want for that. And I feel like life is like just a collection of seasons. There's a season for hustling, there's a season for family building, and I felt like this was the season for me to kind of just take a break, relax, and allow myself to fail society's expectations of me. Especially that I had this, like, I felt like there was this window that was the prime time to do it, where I'm not as broke as I used to be in my early 20s. uh,
Hmm.
and I can kind of like actually have fun as an adult, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because everyone is like the 20s are the best, but your 30s are your 20s, but with more money,
Exactly.
which is totally true. Totally true. Um, oh, I was thinking about something that you just said. What was it? About the adult gap here. I've lost my train of thought. It's, it's the cafe, guys. It's the cafe.
It's the Brazilian music.
um, let's talk about, okay, since we're talking about like failures, like giving yourself the room to fail this year, do you actually feel like you failed at anything?
Yes. I used to like not be comfortable at just watching like TV.
Mm,
I used to like be so anxious of that. And one of the first things I did when I quit my job was just like watch like I watched Game of Thrones for the first time and finished like the whole 8 seasons in like 2 weeks. And that was honestly, like, during that time, I was still super anxious. Like, is this like, is this right? But at the end of after I finished the season, I gave myself a pat on the back for actually like starting to do things like that. I feel like that is an accomplishment for me to just be able to sit back and relax. Um, yeah, like I have other endeavors that I feel like it's not going anywhere. Like for example, I wanted to create a travel page, and it's like so hard to maintain it now. Like now that I've experimented on it, and it's like, is this really something that I wanted to do? But before I took my gap year, I thought that's what I wanted to do. So
mm-hmm.
like I feel like doing this little experiments and like finding out whether like you really want them or not, those are examples for me of like just you sampling life, sampling things that you may want to pursue. And if it doesn't work out, then at least at least your what ifs are answered.
Yeah, and I think because the world is so much smaller, we have so much more access to information. The example you gave of like becoming a travel blogger and content creator, we all understand how to do that at this point, right? Like we have enough examples on the internet to show us how that's done. So you're like, okay, I could do that. But
Mhm.
then doing it is a whole other thing, right? Actually doing it and taking the time to make the content. I'm
Yeah,
like, this is like incredibly relatable because I'm doing what you're doing, right? So actually doing it is so time consuming
exactly.
and you don't realize like the amount of effort that you need to put into it, the amount of time you need to put into it. And so there's a lot of things I think that we think, oh, I could do that or I want to do that, but you won't know till you do it,
Right.
right?
I was going to say that's the beauty of that. At least your what ifs get answered, and you don't go back, looking back at life and asking yourself, what if I actually pursue this, or if I did not.
Yeah.
So at least
I think I think for me, so upcoming for me is my move to Taiwan. I was telling Mars a little bit about this. I plan to move to Taiwan for the next year, for a minimum a year, because I'm going to be enrolled in a program to study Mandarin full time as a student. And it's because my family is Taiwanese, but I was born and raised in Canada. And so I already speak, but I don't read or write. And for me, I've always, always, always had this drive to learn Mandarin properly because I want to pass it on to the next generation.
nice.
At this point in my life, I think I want kids. Who knows, that might change. But for right now, I want to, yeah, pass this on to the next generation. And so for me, it's like this like obligation I feel to pass on the tradition. But I've had this idea in my head for many years as an adult to go back to Taiwan and do this, but there were so many things to stop me, whether it was like I was in a long-term partnership, or I had a really good job, or the promotion was coming up so I couldn't go, or the job I had wouldn't give me the time off. If I couldn't get the time off and I had to quit, could I get the job back? What if I couldn't get the job back? Then what kind of job would be available to me? Would they even want to hire me after taking a year off? Does a year gap on my resume look bad? Like all of these thoughts came up, but the bigger what if is, what if I don't go to Taiwan to pursue this goal that I have that is like way, way, way bigger than all these other little what ifs, right?
Mm,
Which is what ultimately pushed me to doing it. As well as now, this is like the perfect timing for me because I'm already in my adult gap year, so I don't have anything holding me back. I don't
mm,
have a job that's waiting for me. So I'm just like, I'll just go to Taiwan, figure it out when I get back what I'm going to do for work. But I think that taking the risk and taking that leap is like a huge, it's an opportunity for huge growth. Like I'm really, really excited to see the version of me that I become after this next year, because the version of me I am today, after a year of already taking time off work, is so completely different than July 2022 Justine. And I feel like there have been so many learnings in this last year just from removing myself from my regular routine and environment and just staying in that comfort zone. I
yeah.
think there's so much you can learn from taking the time. But I think to your point, Mars, like for me as well, we are really lucky that we were financially able to do that, because I think finance is the biggest
Barrier to do.
barrier. For sure,
Yeah.
it's the biggest barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To your point about like the finance side of it, so like for me, it wasn't enough that I was able to save up. I needed to know how fast I can recover once I'm like I went back to the job market. So before I actually like before I actually sent that resignation, I was interviewing around and trying to negotiate offers, trying to get it as high as possible, just to know where like I was in the market, and like how fast it can recover once I'm ready. And I felt like that for me was the biggest boost of confidence. Like just like having a number on your head, right? Like if I okay, like I take this gap here, like can I recover after like X months, of coming back? And yeah, it kind of like created like a safe, controlled space for me to be able to plan it out, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So then, do you think that taking the boot camp and changing industries and changing roles, like this was a huge part of what made you feel comfortable taking the
Absolutely.
gap year?
Yeah. So I after like I didn't get to do the boot camp, like the data boot camp, because I felt comfortable with the industry that I'm like in the field that I'm in. If anything, that would just like augment like my current skill set. But I really felt like my previous boss like recruiting me into product was like already like a huge door opener for me. But I did do like before I was able to transition into product, I did like a coding boot camp, and I feel like that's the reason why he kind of like saw me as well, because I had the ability to kind of like talk to technical people and
Mm,
understand what they do. So it in many ways the boot camp that I did prior, even if I did not finish it, like really changed the trajectory of my career from like, having to like be in meetings all day and just do operations to like now doing like product and just like, like working with engineers and all that. Like it really gave me the ability to to be able to do what I'm doing now, which is like take time off, or like be able to work on projects, like small term projects, to kind of supplement my budget for the gap year.
I think that's a great example of you taking your like destiny into your own hands. You didn't really know what would come of taking that boot camp, but taking it really, yeah, as you said, like changed the trajectory of things. But I think that's a good reminder that sometimes those things that are, they feel like big investments, not only in time, but like financially big investments,
Mhm.
especially like anything educational can feel like a
Yeah,
big investment
yeah.
money wise. But like taking that step to learn a new skill or try something new can open doors that you weren't expecting,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I think that's a good reminder as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, we have about 20 minutes left, so I just wanted to open the floor to any questions that people have. You're welcome to either go like mics off, camera on, whatever you're comfortable with, or just type it into the chat and we'll filter through some questions. I see Sanam's hand is already up, so whatever you're comfortable with, feel free to ask your question. Um,
Sure, I'm just going to unmute. Thank you,
yeah, that's
Mark
perfect.
and Justine, for such a great session, and I really do appreciate the kind of the vulnerability and openness of this. So I guess my question is, to your point, Mars, about just trying and testing things that you thought would be interesting, even whilst you were employed and now fun employed-ish.
Mhm.
You mentioned like trying to become a travel blogger and a couple of other things, but how do you feel, or how did you go about exposing those tests to your audience, be it your colleagues and your friends, right? You're in a position where you're
Mm,
trying something, you're trying to get used to failing openly, but equally you're
right,
in a good job. So
right.
now that I am fun employed, like what's your mindset around doing that openly?
Right. Well, there are
Yeah.
definitely projects. By the way, thank you for the question. There are definitely projects that I did not like open up to like my peers, because I wanted to have the safe space to fail, especially when I was beginning. When I was like having all these side hustles, one thing that I did was I created a drop shipping site. Um, for a beauty brand, and it did not take off. It did like almost zero sales. It was so bad. Like it was just like me testing things around, and I did that with my sister. And so that part, like I didn't go around announcing that. I was just like testing the waters. There are things that I have kind of like opened up to my friends and family in an attempt to also like put myself out there and like be more authentic. So for example, like my travel page at first like was like open, yeah, I was like kind of like promoting that on my personal page as well. I feel like for that, for that project in particular, it has more to do with me like really wanting to like live authentically and like to the and just yeah, authentically, and put myself out there and not be afraid to be seen for what I am, for who I am. But I would say like don't feel bad if there are things that you want to hide from others, because at the end of the day, you kind of just like, it's like going to the gym, right? Like you cannot just go from 0 to 100. Sometimes you just like go to the gym and just maybe leave after, because your goal is just to get used to just going to the gym. So it's like, building this like little wins that like would eventually snowball into like bigger wins, I would say. And I feel like also my exposure in a startup environment has really helped me have this like be at like agility mindset of just trying things out, because I've seen businesses do it. I just I figure like, why can't I just do that in my own personal life? Like every day, like I was pawning projects at work and just testing them out, and like why can't I just do that in my actual life too? So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that helps. I always, yeah, I guess I always thought that in order to test something out and do it successfully, that you needed to kind of tell people about it, right? Especially if you are, like for example, drop shipping a product that could result in more sales for you. So you need to tell people in your circle. But then equally, I kind of go through the same one. I'm like, oh, I don't want to tell them if I'm still like failing and I'm scared of failing. So how do you do that?
Mhm.
You know, authentically and
Mhm.
preserving your own like image of yourself. So
Right.
I guess that helps, but I don't know how to. Yeah, I think that's just part of the parcel of like getting used to being open and stuff. So that
Yeah.
helps,
Yeah. It's like building a muscle for it. Um,
of
you know.
course. And I'm so sorry. I have a second one, and I'm happy to take a pause if anyone else has a question. But I guess quickly, when as you are on this journey now, have you put that up on LinkedIn, for example? Like, have you told that audience that you're doing this and you're,
Not yet.
not
Not yet.
really?
But
That's a good
it's happening.
question.
It's a good question. I I haven't, but I do have plans to do it. It's just not at the top of my priority list at the moment. But because like when I was imagining my gap year, I imagined it as like the first 6 months, just like experimenting and just like chilling and doing whatever. And then like
Yeah.
towards the end, like I would start like kind of like concluding it, and like giving it more exposure. So that's why like I haven't like put that at the top of my priority list, but it's one of the things that I've been thinking about. And I'm curious, like why you're asking about it. Have you been thinking about doing the same for your little
Yeah.
experimentation?
Well, I think it's just you see it all the time where people get a lot of likes and emojis and like go
Mhm.
you, good on you, which kind of makes me think like it'd be great to
Ah,
do, right? Because I've just started mine, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't. I have to tell myself like I'm not doing it to get those likes. In
that
fact, I
too.
don't know if it could be perceived, differently by other employees in the future. So I'm in
Mhm.
this phase where I'm like, it'd be nice to tell people and like, represent the fact that you can have a career and take a break in your late 20s or early 30s and like show that it's normal. But at the same time, there's that fear of like, well, it could be perceived,
Yeah,
badly, or recruiters could take advantage of that because they know you've been off the market
yeah,
for a while. So yeah, I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm just gonna take it slow, do this for me, and like not put it out there because I don't know what I want out of that response, or like by
right.
putting it out there and just yeah, to exactly what you said, right? Give it a couple of months. If I feel I have something to share, then at least I'll do it with like something to show for it versus just doing it for comments and likes. I don't know if that's the right way to think about it, but that's why I was asking on like how to deal with that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But
and I
Yeah.
think to add to all of this is I think since the pandemic, it is way more socially acceptable to have gaps in your resume.
Yes.
So I
Mhm.
think
yes.
that it is much, much easier right now to take a gap year. And for me, as at least any employer in the future for me, I will have to tell them that I've taken not only a year off, but I'm going to take a whole other year off to study. So I've taken a year to like travel and chill, and I'm going to take a second year now to focus on education.
Nice.
And so I will be out of the
Market.
workforce for
Yeah.
2 years minimum. And so any employer that I will have in the future will need to be aligned with me and my values. And I hope that they can understand that that time was really valuable. Like,
Mhm.
although I wasn't in the workforce, I come back stronger, better, having other skills that I can bring
Right.
to the table.
Honestly, I
Yeah.
can tell you other recruiters would probably envy that. Like I've read a few articles about, about people like doing like the most exotic things in the world, and the recruiters actually kind of like that and like actually start interviewing them how they were able to do it. So yeah.
Yeah.
No, that helps.
Sanam, yeah, that helped?
Yeah, it's good to, I guess, just get it out there and see what how you guys approach that. So I appreciate that. I know we're getting close to time, so I'll mute myself. But thank
No, no,
you.
no, that was great. Thank you. Thank you. I actually got a question from Jenny here in the chat. She DM'd me asking if I'm comfortable sharing how much money I saved or I was able to afford in Vancouver, BC with the emceeing 3 days a week. And so I can be brutally honest, the emceeing gig I do is minimum wage, minimum wage for about 4 hours per night. So it's about $60 that I make every time that I MC, and only 3 nights a week. So that's $180 a month. That's not cutting it for Vancouver life. Okay. That's not cutting it. I don't think it's not cutting it anywhere.
Mhm.
So a huge part of my savings came from like just how I function every day. Like I'm a very financially responsible person. And so it's been years and years of saving that have led up to me being able to do this. Um, which if you ask anyone in money and finance, like the biggest difference between someone who has lots of savings and less is someone who doesn't is the time factor. Like the sooner you can save, the better, and then you can build compound interest and all those things. And so for me, I've been working since I was 12. don't don't ask about Canada labor laws. That's not okay. But I've been working since I was 12. And
Okay.
so I also lived at home with my family until the age of 26. So between 12 and 26, for 14 years, I had been working quite a bit and I didn't pay rent the entire time. Even when I went off to university, I stayed at home because I lived close enough to commute. And so there was like a multitude of factors that played into how I was able to save money. But because I had like years and years of compound interest and savings, that's what led to me being able to afford a whole year off in Vancouver. Plus, I was previously at Shopify, and I'm sure all of you have heard Shopify did like multiple rounds of layoffs, but I was cut off in the first round, and they did give like a fairly generous severance package. So that helped a lot. That did help me a lot because I used that severance package to travel Europe for 4 months. And then I went to Brazil for a bit. I did some travel in like Washington State. I did Alaska with my family. And there's just been like lots of cool opportunities that have come from having severance, thankfully. And then just day to day, just being very frugal. Like if you ask my friends, I love to cook, which is also a blessing. Like I think if I didn't love to cook or didn't know how to cook, it'd be very hard to save money because a lot of spending goes to food. So I don't eat out very often, and I'm totally okay with that. And other people would not be, right? You're missing out on those like the social aspect, and like if you're like such a big foodie, you want to try new restaurants and stuff, like some people wouldn't be okay with sacrificing that. But for me, that was something I was okay with, which is yeah. So yeah, Jenny, if you're curious, feel free to like DM me on Instagram. We can talk more about the all the other factors. But I think for me, it is a very like specific, unique scenario. I don't know that anyone could like mimic what I did to save money because it's just been habits. It's been habits. And I did speak with a financial coach this year as well. I worked with a financial coach to work on budgeting and like figuring out how to plan for my future, especially with taking this much time off. And just like a little foreshadowing, we will be speaking with this financial coach in the fall for another fireside chat. So if you're interested in budgeting and all that, we will be doing that in the fall. So I hope that answers your question, Jenny. I did see that, Christine, you had your hand up here, but then you asked the question in the chat. How do you go back to working after traveling long term? I'm on month 5 out of 6 for time off and feel a huge dread going back. Any tips appreciated?
Yeah, that's such an important question. If you don't mind me asking, Christine, also in the chat, if you can kind of like give a background of what you do. But I can answer this from my perspective, because I actually have a job, like a contractor job at the moment. I'm using it to fill my bank so I can do a full stretch of the adult gap year. And extend my runway, right? Because I've kind of been living a little bit above the lifestyle that I planned to have. So it's been cutting into my savings. For me, I got that job because of my network, which is not really going to be helpful for anyone because maybe, that's not available for everyone. But I would say a lot of opportunities have come to me because I keep on publishing my work online. So I'll give you an example. And I didn't realize this until people started contacting me for it. So back in my other workplace, I did like I did a project with another company, and that company so happened to publish the project that we did as a case study. And then I started getting calls from market researchers wanting to interview me for that. And I learned that there is a huge market for investors who want to interview customers of certain software. Like, for example, if you were previously a customer of, say, for example, HubSpot, or I don't know, like other B2B, like Salesforce or whatever, like they love to interview customers of a lot of these companies who are trying to raise rounds because they want to know if they can be invested on. And they pay really well. Like some of them pay like $500 per hour. And there is a market for this. So I would say, like, whatever like work you do, like just keep on publishing it online. I would suggest like places where there is like for example, Medium, because they rank highly on the SEO page, like places where like you can be found pretty quickly. And then on my end, what I plan to do is just to like work on smaller projects, like contractor projects, and keep on freelancing, because what I want to do is actually like build up this portfolio of me working on different projects with different companies. And then once I'm ready to actually have like a longer term job, then like that website of mine will be online for people to check. And as early as now, whenever like I have like people praise or give me shout outs at like this kind of like gig that I have, like I like already like record whatever they're saying, because I want to put that on my website in the future. So yeah, my strategy for now is just to like work on small projects, like do freelancing, and then just publish it on my website once that's ready. Oh, nice. You're already a UX designer at Google. So you're already in tech.
Yeah. And Christine, I can't relate enough with the dread of going back. After a year off and taking another year, I guess I'm like still avoiding going back, taking another year off. I'm having a hard time imagining what it likes to go back to like a 9 to 5, like a regular 9 to 5. So I'm taking this time to figure out like what other pathways I can take similar to Mars, trying different things, because I think when you're in it and you're in the 9 to 5, my friends kind of gave me this metaphor of like you're in this box with these walls that you don't even realize that are surrounding you. And once those walls come down and you're experiencing something very different in your routine, that's when you can kind of see what other opportunities are there, and other opportunities present themselves to you when that happens as well. Things that you wouldn't normally be able to receive or have the capacity for or look for because you're in your box. And so I think this time off, if you're like taking the time to do some exploring, I think you never know what will come your way. There's been like many interesting things that have happened this past year for me that I could give you examples of. I see Joyce's hand up, and then there's another question from Christine as well. Let's do Joyce really quick. If you want to either hop on the mic or pop it in the chat, feel free. Oh, hi, Joyce. I can see you. You're just muted.
Oh,
there you go.
I thought I would just quickly like turn on my camera and like speak with you guys. And first of all, I wanted to like share about like the idea of like trying different things when you have the opportunity to. And I think that really opened up a lot of doors, because I actually came back from a working holiday program that I did in Australia. And before that, I was working like a 9 to 5 where I felt very boxed. And during that trip, like I did many different things. Like I worked at a cafe, I worked as a travel sales agent, I worked at a hostel. Like all of those things were really interesting and fun. But now that I'm like, I finished that like phase and I'm back in, the real life, I just find it like really difficult to like get back to the like 9 to 5 and thinking that okay, now what, like this is the kind of only way to go if you want to like have money to like, let's say, have the ability to travel again in the future. And I guess also having a fear that, oh, everyone who's doing digital nomading or who's traveling abroad, they all have a tech job or something that's lucrative and like in demand. And just having that like stress that like, okay, I have to get into tech in order to make enough money to kind of do it again. And I love that for Justine, you're like taking the time to kind of study English, sorry, not what I'm saying, study like Chinese abroad. And that it's like something that's different from like, oh, I'm gonna get a tech job in like data analytics or something. So like, how do you get about, the stressed that like, oh, you must get into tech in order to succeed in life? Or is there like a different path that you can explore and give yourself like the room for failure if it's not tech? Yeah, I guess that's the question.
Just before Mars, I feel like you have an answer for this. Just before you hop in, I just want to note that we are supposed to technically end in 2 minutes. I'm happy to stay. If Mars, you're okay to stay, we'll continue this conversation. And then if any of you have to hop off, don't feel bad because I know we've reached time, but we'll wrap up maybe like 10 minutes later, I think, after we answer these couple questions. Yeah. But yeah, Mars, I'll throw it over to you if you have thoughts on Joyce's question.
At the moment, I don't have thoughts because the main world that I know at the moment is tech. But yeah, let me think about it because I have friends who are not doing tech, but they're able to afford this lifestyle where they're also experimenting on in life. But yeah, I don't know another path at the moment.
Okay, my 2 cents then for you, Joyce, would be that I was in tech for a hot minute. I was in tech with Shopify. Tech's not doing super hot these days, as you know. Lots of layoffs happening. Yes, it can be quite lucrative depending on what you do. And I think like depending on the role you have within tech, like for example, even though I work for an e-commerce company, I wasn't coding, I wasn't doing data, I wasn't doing any of that. I was working for the HR department and I was doing like operations and logistics and like admin for them. And so there are still many different types of roles, which means you don't necessarily need to learn a whole other skill set to join the tech industry, right? Like the skills you already have may already fit into a role that is there. But that being said, I it I can see why it feels like it's the only pathway to making lots of money. I can see why it feels that way. Um, but I think the thing that you have to keep in mind is we are in a new world of many streams of income. And many people like exploring what that looks like, and like traditional income isn't the only way to make money these days. I will say like non-traditional methods of like becoming a content creator or becoming a full-time blogger or like whatever it looks like, YouTubing, whatever it looks like, um, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy and can take many years. But if that's something you're interested in and you have a full-time job right now and you want to pursue that on the side, the advice given to me from like co-founder Emily Fang of Asian Wander Women is when she started her YouTube channel, she's like, treat the first year of YouTube like a hobby. Even though long term it can become passive income, you need to treat the first year like a hobby so that you don't put all this pressure on yourself and you don't burn out. Because if you are expecting to make the money and monetize it right away, you're going to feel like you're failing and it's going to feel like, why am I putting in the time into this thing that's not going anywhere? And so she said, treat it like a hobby for the first year, just enjoy yourself, enjoy the process, like do the things that help you learn this new skill because starting YouTube is a whole new skill. It would be for me. I don't do video editing and transitions and all those things, right? So just like take your time with it. I think we all have a tendency for wanting like instant gratification as well, but it is important to try to stay patient. I don't know if that was like very helpful advice, but I think those are things to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, just need to add to that. I would say like aside from like YouTube and all that, there are other platforms as well that like where you can really make money. For example, Emily's advice is actually really good. When you hop on a platform and your main purpose is not to like make money, you actually start making money. For example, when I like back in 2020 was when I was like kind of like figuring out like whether I'm going to go to data or not, I started like writing personal cheat codes for myself on data analytics and started publishing that on Medium and Gumroad. And then the side income started trickling in. But when I write about things where like I'm trying to like actually like make money, like there's not a lot of views. It's really interesting. So it's like, yeah, just like hop on a platform, try to make value for yourself and others. And if you really believe, I mean, if it gives value to you, it's probably good enough to give value to other people. And from what I've observed, that's where when monetization starts coming in. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, like taking the focus off of monetizing, because you never know what's going to happen. The last question we'll field today, because I don't think we had any other ones come through, but Christine asked, how do you combat loneliness and wanting community while traveling alone and with no partner?
Yeah. I can give my 2 cents on this, but I have to like give a caveat that I have a partner, but I definitely still feel lonely at times. And this is where Asian Wonder Women actually comes in. I discovered a community like somewhere this year, and it's like been really helpful. And just like meeting people from different places whenever like I visit a new city, like I kind of like hop into the chat on Facebook and see if like there's anyone who would want to meet up. And it's really like kind of like helped me like emotionally kind of like validate the lifestyle that I'm that I have. But also every now and then, like I feel like I'm making more phone calls to my friends from childhood, like more often now than when I was like working. Because you kind of like feel that feeling of longingness too. So yeah.
That's nice, reconnecting with your childhood friends. I think, yeah, I'm biased also to Asian Wonder Women, but that's why we're all here. I think you see value in this community and definitely leverage it. It's definitely a global community, so wherever you go, I'm sure there's someone in the community that has already joined online. And if you just message in the Facebook or on Instagram, whatever it is, you will find someone who is in that city that you're in, which is really cool. I also like just some, I guess, practical advice, things that I used while I was traveling solo for 4 months. Definitely lonely, because I am a super extroverted person. I really enjoy social time. I really enjoy meeting new people. But when you're alone, it can both be easy and hard. Like easy because when you're alone, you're way more approachable than if you were in a group setting, right? For people and strangers to approach you. However, at the same time, when you're alone, you're alone. So the practical things that I implemented were I used Bumble BFF sometimes if I was staying in a city longer. I found that it took me longer to connect with the women on there because you would have to like mutually match. And then if you didn't match in time, like maybe you were heading to the next city and then it's like, oh, sorry, we just missed each other, blah, blah, blah. So like if you're in a city for a longer period of time, I think Bumble BFF is a really cool opportunity to meet locals, especially. If you're looking to meet travelers, hanging out at hostels is a great place to do it. Like you don't need to stay at the hostel if you don't want to. Definitely just like hanging out because they run lots of social events. That's a great way to meet other travelers. I would also say I was for 4 months in Europe. I did solely couch surfing, which is also like a whole other community in itself and a really great way to save money. That's also why I still have money to live in Vancouver. I didn't pay for accommodations in Europe for 4 months. So couch surfing is a cool community that I can talk more about as well if you're curious at a later time and with anyone who wants to DM me. But then couch surfing also has a function where you can like just hang out with people. You don't have to stay with them in their homes. So there are, yeah, just like many cool ways for you to meet other people while on the road. So yeah, there are many tips and tricks, but if there's anything we didn't touch on, feel free to DM either of us. And otherwise, I know I've taken us over time. Joyce also just mentioned working for accommodation in Australia. Yeah, there's that program as well. That's a great way to meet people. And yeah, so if you want to spend the next like minute or so throwing in any links here like Sanam did, feel free. But that is the wrap up of our session. Thank you so much for joining us for July. We have lots of cool things happening in the next few months as well. Lots of great speakers coming up. But thank you, Mars, for joining us and all of you for your great questions. And we will talk to you soon. I'm just going to stop recording, but I'll be here if you have anything left in the chats.